The QAS CPG states that every adult has the right to make decisions regarding healthcare that is recommended by the clinician. This is under the circumstance that the person has sound mind and capacity to make these decisions. Mr. Benson made a voluntary decision to refuse treatment where he had been informed and advised of relevant medical implications. It is this decision made under legal circumstances that must be respected by the paramedics. In the circumstances where a person desires a specific directive of medical treatment, an advanced care directive can be used to communicate the person's wishes. These are common with the elderly, people with certain diseases, and only come into effect when a patient loses their capacity to make responsible decisions. The power of attorney is a document appointing one person to be able to make healthcare decisions for another, where their ability to make decisions for themselves is affected. The clinical assessment identified that Mr. Benson displayed signs and symptoms of an AMI, including shortness of breath, unrelieved central chest pain, nausea, heavy arms, pallor, clammy skin, and hypotension. He agreed to treatment of rest, oxygen, and GTN, but refused the paramedics' request to transport him to hospital. Mr. Benson has made a valid refusal, and his daughter does not have the legal capacity to countermand his wishes. In Queensland, Mr. Benson's rights to consent to or refuse medical treatment come under the laws detailed in the Queensland Law Handbook regarding health and wellbeing, medical law, and consent to medical treatment. He has also provided a copy of his AHD, where he possesses legal rights by which he is able to legally withdraw life-sustaining measures. Mr. Benson has been deemed valid via the following VRCA assessment: voluntary, informed, relevant, capacity, and advice. Under the Relationship and Powers of Attorney Act and Guardianship and Administration Act, Jenny was appointed as the health attorney, potentially allowing her to decide upon the level of care provided for Mr. Benson. Jenny would only be able to represent Mr. Benson if his decision-making capacity was assessed and deemed impaired by paramedics. Only then could Jenny consent to the transportation of Mr. Benson to hospital. In this case, the AHD still supersedes Jenny's authority when deciding upon specific healthcare matters specified within the AHD, including CPR. John may still refuse Jenny's decision to carry out further treatment and transportation to hospital, as the decision was inconsistent with good medical practice. This was only applicable as Mr. Benson was still conscious and possessed unimpaired decision-making. The AHD provides directions regarding future health matters, including requests for treatment, requests to withhold treatment, and refusal of treatment. The AHD may authorise an attorney to make healthcare decisions for a person. The Mental Health Act outlines that when deciding on the treatment and care to be provided, the views, wishes, and preferences of the patient should be taken into account, including an AHD. To be recognised as a legal document, it must be in writing, signed, and dated by the patient, witness, and recognised medical practitioner, both of whom certify the person had capacity to complete the directive. A power of attorney is appointed through an AHD and may only make decisions about a person's health when they are deemed to have an impaired capacity. The Guardianship and Administration Act outlines the guidelines for withholding life-sustaining measures. An AHD should not be relied upon if directions are unclear or ambiguous, inconsistent with good medical practice, clinical circumstances differ, or the patient's medical circumstances differ to those set out in the directive. In the event that Mr. Benson loses the capacity to make his own decisions, the AHD will take priority over the wishes of the appointed attorney, as stated in the Powers of Attorney Act. However, this was not the case. Paramedics have the right to provide life-sustaining measures. However, Mr. Benson's execution of his AHD prior to his onset of chest pain made it clear that he did not want any life-sustaining measures implemented, irrespective of the circumstances. The AHD only comes into effect if the person is unable to make their own decisions, where Mr. Benson is at full capacity to do this. Paramedics have a vital role in assisting the community to deal with the reality of death and its consequences. In caring for patients towards the end of their life, good medical practice involves understanding that you do not have a duty to try to prolong life at all costs. However, you do have a duty to know when not to initiate and when to cease attempts at prolonging life, while ensuring that your patients receive appropriate relief from distress. and accepting that patients have the right to refuse medical treatment or to request the withdrawal of treatment already started. Mr. Benson therefore has the right to refuse medical treatment and has received relief from his prior distress. Despite the paramedics' attempts to provide life-sustaining measures, accepting his wishes was carried out in recognition of good medical practice. As an integral component of ethical standards, the 4 principles of bioethics the paramedics upheld include autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. QAS Resuscitation General Guidelines outlines the paramedic scope of practice, where lawful direction to withhold CPR can be provided. Life-sustaining measures can be withheld in each of the following categories. Documentations that may be available at the scene include the ARP consisting of a medical decision and patient decision as to when to withhold or withdraw a life-sustaining measure. Such measures listed in Mr. Benson's AHG outlined a number of life-sustaining treatments not to be performed. Jenny's directions cannot override Mr. Benson's wishes as he has full decision-making capacity regarding his health concerns. Thus, not transporting Mr. Benson was the correct decision as continuation of life-sustaining measures would be inconsistent with good paramedic practice. Thank you.